सरस्वती वंदना एवं दीप प्रज्वलन।
या कुन्देन्दु तुषारहारधवला या शुभ्रवस्त्रावृता या वीणावरदण्डमण्डितकरा या श्वेतपद्मासना या ब्रह्माच्युतशङ्करप्रभृतिभिः देवैः सदा वन्दिता सा मां पातु सरस्वती भगवती निःशेषजाड्यापहा।
नमस्कार, सुप्रभात। आज के इस खूबसूरत सुबह में और हमारे रोल ऑफ टीचर्स इन प्रमोटिंग इंडियन नॉलेज सिस्टम इस वेबिनार में मैं अपने दो प्रमुख अतिथियों का, इसमें प्रोफेसर घंटी मूर्ति, नेशनल कोऑर्डिनेटर इंडियन नॉलेज सिस्टम डिवीजन, मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एजुकेशन, जो कि AICT में स्थापित है, और प्रोफेसर मिशेल डेनिनो, जो प्रोफेसर हैं IIT गांधीनगर में। हमें कुछ ही देर में वो हमसे जुड़ेंगे। उन दोनों का हार्दिक अभिनंदन करती हूँ, स्वागत करती हूँ। यह बहुत ही आवश्यक है कि हम अपनी करिकुलम में, हम अपने पाठ्यक्रम में, हम अपनी पढ़ाई में अपनी संस्कृति, अपनी ज्ञान परंपरा, अपने रीति रिवाज, अपने खान पान, अपनी भाषाओं पर गर्व करें। पर यह गर्व जब तक हम उनके बारे में जानेंगे नहीं, जब तक हम उनके बारे में ज्ञान अर्जित नहीं करेंगे, तब तक संभव नहीं है। इसी उद्देश्य के साथ, हालांकि मशीन लर्निंग, आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस, इंटरनेट ऑफ थिंग्स, रोबोटिक्स, ब्लॉकचेन, इन सब के समय में इंडियन नॉलेज सिस्टम अपने आप में ऐसा लगता है कि क्या इसकी आवश्यकता है। परंतु अगर हम अपने पुराने इंस्क्रिप्शंस को देखें या हम अपनी पुराने जो हमारे पास अवेलेबल हैं उनको पढ़ें, तो हमें ज्ञात होगा कि भारत देश हर तरह के ज्ञान में, चाहे वो वास्तुशास्त्र हो या वो वैदिक मैथमेटिक्स हो या वो एस्ट्रोनॉमी हो, बहुत अधिक विकसित एक राष्ट्र रहा है। और इसी समृद्धि को, इसी धरोहर को सजाने का काम हमारी इंडियन नॉलेज सिस्टम की जो सेल है, जिसे प्रोफेसर घंटी मूर्ति जी अपने हाथों से सजो रहे हैं, और उसमें तरह तरह के नए विकल्प ला रहे हैं, जिसमें कि IKS के नए सेंटर्स का एस्टैब्लिशमेंट है। बहुत सारी इंटरडिसिप्लिनरी रिसर्च के लिए उन्होंने प्रपोजल्स इनवाइट करे हैं। वो कुछ ही समय में फैकल्टी डेवलपमेंट प्रोग्राम भी इस दिशा में करेंगे। तो हम चाहते हैं कि हम अपनी पुरानी जो हमारी परंपरा है, जो हमारा बहुत ही बहुमूल्य ज्ञान है, उसको सजाएं संवारें। इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ मैं एक बार फिर से आपका धन्यवाद करती हूँ यहाँ उपस्थित होने के लिए, और आपसे आग्रह करती हूँ कि इस ऑगस्ट गैदरिंग को, जो कि लाइव है यूट्यूब पर, इसे एड्रेस करें। धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद ममता जी, नमस्ते। सभी को मेरा नमस्कार। ओम मातृभ्यो नमः, पितृभ्यो नमः, गुरुभ्यो नमः, सभावियो नमः, सभापतिभ्यश्च नमो नमः। सभी को मेरा नमस्कार। और इस मंच पर मुझे बुलाने के लिए पहले तो मैं AICT के अटल सिंह का बहुत बहुत आभार व्यक्त करना चाहता हूँ। विशेषतर उसमें ममता जी को मैं बहुत ही आभार व्यक्त करना चाहता हूँ, क्योंकि उन्होंने इस महत्व, जिसका इंडियन नॉलेज सिस्टम के महत्व को समझा और इसको बहुत अच्छे से इनकॉर्पोरेट करने का पूरा हमारे साथ सहयोग, जब भी हम जाते हैं तो हमको उनका सहयोग मिलता है, तो उसके लिए पहले मैं आभार व्यक्त करना चाहता हूँ। आज हमारे साथ मेरे साथ प्रोफेसर MD श्रीनिवास जी और प्रोफेसर मिशेल डेनिनो जी को आना था। प्रोफेसर मिशेल डेनिनो जी, अभी जैसे गुरु परंपरा में हम बोलते हैं ना, सबसे प्रायोरिटी जो होता है टीचर का, क्लास होता है, तो उनका अभी क्लास चल रहा है, तो उन्होंने बोला कि 10 मिनट बाद आएंगे। उन्होंने पहले से हमको बताया था, तो वो 10 मिनट बाद हमसे जुड़ेंगे। प्रोफेसर रमेश श्रीनिवास जी का हेल्थ थोड़ा ठीक नहीं है, तो वो इसलिए आज हमसे जुड़ नहीं पा रहे हैं। तो आज मैं और प्रोफेसर मिशेल डैननो जी आप लोगों के सामने हमारी कुछ विचार और बातें रखेंगे। तो जब व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट इंडियन नॉलेज सिस्टम्स, जब हम लोग बात करते हैं भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा की, तो हमारे यहाँ कुछ दिमाग में कुछ ऐसे चीजें आती है। पहले तो ये लगता है कि भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा में भारतीय क्या है, ज्ञान क्या है और परंपरा क्या है। तो ये तीनों को जब हम लोग देखते हैं, इंडियन नॉलेज, इंडियन क्या है, नॉलेज क्या है, सिस्टम्स क्या है, इसको क्यों बोलते हैं, और लगता है कि ठीक है अगर है कुछ तो भी क्या जरूरत है। प्रश्न तो उठते ही हैं कि क्या ये यूनिक है, इंडियन नॉलेज सिस्टम्स, इज दिस समथिंग इंडियन अबाउट इट। और दूसरा लगता है कि अगर ठीक है, इवन इफ इट इज यूनिक, क्या ये जरूरी है कि जो हमारे पूर्वजों ने जो पढ़ा था या उन्होंने समझा था, जिस दृष्टिकोण से उन्होंने देखा था, वो आज उसका रेलेवेंसी क्या है। और तीसरा चीज ये है कि अगर इवन थोड़ा रेलेवेंट है भी, तो आगे जाकर हमें भारत को अमृत काल में नेक्स्ट 25 साल में हमको डेवलप कंट्री बनाना है और पूरा इसको हमको उभर कर आना है विश्व में। तो उसमें इसका इंडिया के प्रॉस्पेरिटी में भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा का क्या महत्व है। हम तो आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस, मशीन लर्निंग, ये सब की बात करते हैं, टेक्नोलॉजी, फैब्रिकेशन, और इसकी बात बहुत ज्यादा करते हैं। और इसमें, इसके परिप्रेक्ष्य में, इसके कॉन्टेक्स्ट में इंडियन नॉलेज सिस्टम्स का क्या रेलेवेंसी है, ये प्रश्न हमसे हमारे बच्चे करेंगे। और एज ए टीचर हमको इसको, क्योंकि हमारा भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा का पहला सूत्र यही है कि हमको क्वेश्चन करना चाहिए। जितना क्वेश्चन करेंगे वही, उसी को हम इंकरेज करते हैं। अगर आप कोई भी इसमें देखें हमारी परंपरा में, तो संवाद के रूप में होता है, गुरु शिष्य संवाद होता है, पार्वती परमेश्वर का संवाद होता है, और शिष्यों के आपस में संवाद होता है, सभा में संवाद होता है, और प्रश्न उठाते हैं और उसका उत्तर जब तक नहीं मिलता हम खोजते हैं। तो हम एक प्रश्न उठाने वाले सिविलाइजेशन है, और हमारी सभ्यता में जब तक उसको उसका उत्तर नहीं मिलता तब तक खोजते ही रहते हैं, तपस्या करते रहते हैं। ये दो ऐसे मुख्य पहचान है हमारी भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा के। और इसमें अगर हम लोग सब तरह से हम लोग देखें कि भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा, हम भारत ने विश्व को क्या दिया, एक ऐसा क्या चीज दिया, तो अगर उसमें देखेंगे तो हमको बहुत अच्छे से उभर कर आता है कि वी हैव गिवन द भारतीय कंट्रीब्यूशन टू द वर्ल्ड इज दिस गुरु शिष्य परंपरा। और गुरु शिष्य परंपरा में हम इतनी, उसके बारे में क्या बताएं, हम तो उसके महत्व के बारे में हर दिन हम शुरू करते हैं, गुरु ब्रह्मा गुरु विष्णु गुरुदेवो महेश्वर गुरु साक्षात परम ब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। गुरु को तो हमने परमेश्वर से भी ऊंचा स्थान दिया है। ये श्लोक जो आया है, ये एक्चुअली उस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में आया था जब त्रिमूर्ति आकर वो शिष्य से पूछते हैं कि हम तुमको मोक्ष देंगे, तो वो बोलते हैं नहीं, पहले मेरे गुरु हैं, उनको ही मैं वो प्रणाम करता हूँ, उसके बाद ही आपको करूंगा। उस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में वो श्लोक आया था। और एक और लोग इसमें जब गुरु शिष्य परंपरा की बात करते हैं, तो एक ये हमने इसको कभी एज से या कास्ट से या कुछ किसी जेंडर से, किसी से हमने वो उसको रखा ही नहीं है। इनफैक्ट एक गुरु दक्षिणामूर्ति का जो स्तोत्र में आता है, चित्रम वटतरोर्मूले वृद्धा शिष्या गुरुर्युवाः गुरोस्तु मौन व्याख्यानम शिष्यास्तु छिन्न संशया। गुरु यंग गुरु है, युवा गुरु है और वृद्ध शिष्य है, और उनको वो पढ़ा रहे हैं मौन व्याख्या से। इसका मौन व्याख्या से क्या पढ़ा सकते हैं हम, बिना बात किए वो पढ़ा रहे थे, और शिष्यों के संशय जो है छिन्न हो गए, द डाउट्स ऑफ द शिष्यास वर क्लियर। क्यों और कैसे, अगर हम सोचें इसको पीछे से कि इसका बेसिस क्या था, तो एक और हमको मिलता है आपस्तम्भ सूत्र में। उसमें बोलते हैं आचिनोति शास्त्रार्थान आचार्य स्थापयत्यपि स्वयमाचरते यस्माद् आचार्यस्तेन उच्यते। इसका मतलब यह है कि आचार्य उसको बोलते हैं जो शास्त्रों में जो विषय है उसका चयन करता है, कलेक्ट करते हैं, इंटीग्रेट करते हैं, और उसको पूरे जो नॉलेज सिस्टम है उससे इंटीग्रेट करके और उसको अपने अंदर रिफ्लेक्ट होने देते हैं, अपने स्वयं आचरण करते हैं, उनको आचार्य बोलते हैं। तो ऐसे आचार्य के मौन व्याख्या से भी हमको बहुत सारे उनके आचरण को देखकर वो समझ रहे थे, इसीलिए वो मौन व्याख्या से समझ रहे थे। तो एसेंशियली इस तरह से अगर देखें तो भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा में ये तो एक फिलोसॉफिकल फ्रेमवर्क हो गया, क्योंकि ये एक इमोशनल फ्रेमवर्क है, क्योंकि जब तक वो गुरु शिष्य का संबंध उस तरह से नहीं बनता है तो श्रद्धा नहीं बनता है। और कल परसों आचार्य डॉक्टर श्री चामू कृष्ण शास्त्री जी बता रहे थे, जब तक श्रद्धा और विश्वास नहीं होता है तब तक वो कोई कार्य जो है वो उसका फलित नहीं होता है, इट वोंट फ्रुक्टिफाई। और उस श्रद्धा और विश्वास गुरु शिष्य परंपरा में बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण। तो ये तो एक फिलोसफिकल बात हो गया। प्रैक्टिकल बातें करते हैं, अगर एक एट ए वेरी लौकिक लेवल पे अगर बात करें, इज देयर एन इंडियन वे? क्या था ऐसा कि इंडियन नॉलेज सिस्टम जब बोलते हैं तो उसमें यूनिकनेस क्या था? तो मैं आपको सामने बहुत सारे विषय हैं, लेकिन आपके सामने मैं सिर्फ 3 विषय रखूंगा। पहला एक है कि भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा में जो भारतीय दृष्टिकोण है वो बहुत ही अलग है आजकल की जो वेस्टर्न साइंस है। एक उदाहरण देता हूं। ठीक है, मैं इसमें अभी फिलोसॉफिकल डिस्कशंस में नहीं जाऊंगा, मैं एक प्रैक्टिकल एग्जांपल दूंगा जो आपको बहुत इजीली आप रिलेट कर पाएंगे। जैसे देखिए, अगर आपको मैंने एक एप्पल दिखाया या एक आम दिखाया मैंने आपके सामने और बोला कि इसका कॉम्पोजिशन क्या है, तो मॉडर्न साइंस जिस तरह से देखते हैं, हम बोलते हैं कि उसमें कार्बोहाइड्रेट्स है, प्रोटीन्स है, फैट्स है, विटामिन है, मिनरल्स है। इस तरह से उस दृष्टिकोण से देखते हैं। अगर हम लोग वही आयुर्वेद की दृष्टिकोण से देखें तो वो बोलेंगे कि इसमें वात पित्त कफ का ये त्रिदोष का कॉन्सेप्ट लेकर आकर बोलते हैं ये कफ जनक है या वात नाशक है या पित्त जनक है, इस तरह का वो बोलते हैं। सो वो एक ही सिस्टम को दूसरे 2 अलग अलग दृष्टिकोण से देखते हैं। और अगर हम अपने ही बॉडी को लेते हैं, अपने शरीर को लेते हैं, तो उसमें एलोपैथी क्या देखता है? डाइजेस्टिव सिस्टम, इंडिविजुअल ऑर्गन्स, नर्वस सिस्टम, स्केलेटल सिस्टम, इस तरह से देखते हैं। और अगर हम मैं प्रोफेसर मिशेल डैनिनो जी का स्वागत करता हूं, नमस्ते सर। और अगर आयुर्वेदा की तरफ से देखेंगे तो उसमें त्रिदोष का कॉन्सेप्ट आता है, तो वो एक कॉम्प्लेक्स सिस्टम की तरफ से उसको देखते हैं। तो ये दोनों जो दृष्टिकोण हैं, ये क्लासिफिकेशन साइंसेस में इसको एन्यूमरेटिव स्कीम और फेसेटेड स्कीम बोलते हैं, एनालिटिको सिंथेटिक स्कीम बोलते हैं। तो ये जब दृष्टिकोण अलग होता है तो इससे एक यूनिक पर्सपेक्टिव मिलता है, एक अनोखा परिप्रेक्ष्य मिलता है एक कॉम्प्लेक्स सिस्टम्स को देखने का। जब तो इस तरह का दृष्टिकोण जो है पाश्चात्य उसमें भी मिलता है और हमारे उसमें भी मिलता है। सो ये जो यूनिक भारतीय दृष्टि है, जिस तरह से हम अपने आप को एनवायरनमेंट से रिलेट करते हैं, जिस तरह से हम अपने शरीर को देखते हैं, या ये इस तरह का जो इंटेलेक्चुअल प्रॉपर्टी राइट्स को जिस तरह से देखते हैं, ये सब में भारतीय दृष्टिकोण जो है वो बहुत यूनिक है। ये इसीलिए इसका कंट्रीब्यूशन आज भी रेलेवेंट है, क्योंकि आप सोचिए आयुर्वेदा का जिस तरह का सिस्टमिक कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ हेल्थ है, ये एसेंशियली एलोपैथी भी उसी तरफ जा रहा है। दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट इंटीग्रेटिव हेल्थ, वन हेल्थ, इंडिविजुअलाइज्ड पर्सनल मेडिसिन, ऐसे करके बात कर रहे हैं एसेंशियली, व्हिच इज व्हाट एसेंशियली आयुर्वेदा टॉक्स अबाउट। एंड देन इफ यू टॉक अबाउट इंटेलेक्चुअल प्रॉपर्टी राइट्स, व्हिच इज ऑल अबाउट बिजनेस एंड ऑल, how do we manage intellectual property rights? आज अगर देखें कि look at the patenting regime today, they're talking about, I mean, we know that we are patenting medicines and cell lines and all those things, which are actually leading to huge cost of medicines, and that is actually making it available for many people around the world. That is actually causing that rich poor divide, and it's being driven by that. The health systems are in a crisis now. Can there be a Bharatiya model for that? If you look at it, you can actually look at to the intellectual traditions of India, where you'll see that things, the intellectual property rights, for example, of things that were common good, like medicine and education, they were essentially free for everybody who is qualified. But then, and then the teacher was supposed to not sell the knowledge. So एक गुरु को फी लेना नहीं होता था, दक्षिणा मिलता था लेकिन फी नहीं मांग सकते थे। तो उस तरह से वैद्य को फी नहीं मांगना होता था, दक्षिणा देते थे। तो और सोसाइटी इनको सपोर्ट करता था। सो दिस वाज वन वे ऑफ डीलिंग विद थिंग्स दैट आर यूनिवर्सल गुड। And then on the other hand, things that are of discretionary nature, like let's say we are talking about a fabric manufacturing, or making of a fabric, or dyeing of a fabric, or you're talking about making some Arunmula mirror type thing, or bronze casting. These are all held in very strong proprietary knowledge base था, जो शेयर नहीं होता था। और सोसाइटी को ये जो कम्युनिटीज हैं जो इसको बेचते थे, they used to support the society. On the other hand, the ones that were producing it for universal good, they were essentially something that were supported by the society. This could be a unique Bharatiya model that we can actually give. So this is the uniqueness of the Bharatiya Drishtikona that is relevant today to solve current problems. And ऐसे बहुत सारे examples हैं जो इसको हम बात कर सकते हैं। और अगर हम you look at the approaches that are taken in the Bharati Jnana Parampara, whether you take about Rasayana Shastra, whether you talk about Ayurveda, whether you talk about Vaisheshika, all of those essentially are multidisciplinary subjects, and there is a holistic approach to things. So, for a very common example that you can think about is the example of Panchanga. Panchanga is used essentially to predict the monsoon patterns and the weather patterns in a very good way. In fact, that is essentially based on observational astronomy, which has developed into these different models, and that is what is used in the Panchanga calculations. Of course, again, it needs updation and all that, and therefore you'll see regional variants of Panchanga. And why was this important? So that if you can predict the rains, you can essentially, even today, for example, agriculture is mostly dependent on the rainfed agriculture, up to 65%, 70% in our country. So timely prediction of rains is a very important thing. Seasons is very important for managing your agricultural operations. So Panchanga astronomy, observational astronomy led to the Panchanga, which again required a lot of mathematical modeling. And Siddhantic astronomy, जो आर्यभट्टा, भास्कराचार्य, नीलकंठ सोमयाजी, माधवाचार्य, इन लोगों ने जो किया था, that's how it developed. And then the Panchanga was used to calculate and predict the seasons, and that was used to do a proper agriculture. It was used in agriculture. So you see, observational astronomy, mathematics, and agriculture, and water management. All of those things are integrated into these multidisciplinary approaches. And by the way, I just, when I mentioned Madhava, I remembered one thing. One of the misconceptions that we have is that Indian knowledge systems, people were always visualizing something in their tapasya or something like that. And it was all, it is easy to relegate it to tapasya and then say they were just visualizing something in their head. But actually, if you talk about Madhava, he mentions in his book that my model of the planetary systems and astronomy model is better than everybody else in the previous generations. He does not make that claim emptily. He made that claim on the basis of 55 years of astronomical observations that he used to make the calculations and then improve the model. So these were preceded by tapasya, not simply of an imaginary kind, but also something actually that actually did a lot of experiments and things like that. So it is important for us to realize this is as scientific and as experimental as anything else that we deal with in our labs today. And then also, it was also very unique and innovative in approach. Indian knowledge systems. For example, if we again have to go back to Ayurveda to give you one very good example of that, the modern medicine, allopathy, recognized the term zoopharmacognosy in about 1993. This is essentially watching the animals in nature self-medicate. So they go, if you must have seen the dogs and cats that we have, pet dogs जो होते हैं, वो कभी-कभी जाके उसको बुखार होता है तो जाके घास खा लेता है. Okay. How does it know? So that is essentially self-medication by these animals. And what the modern medicine, allopathy, recognized in 1993 was actually mentioned in Shushruta Samhita 2000 years ago. And the idea is that you can find a lot of such innovative approaches. You can actually get new ideas to solve current problems through going through the Indian knowledge systems. So again, here again, we need to remember what Mahakavi Kadadasa said. Just because something is old, it is not always good. And just because something is new, it's not bad. We have to evaluate basically based on their merits and use it what is really required. And then it comes to, so I hope I have convinced you that there is something unique about the Bharatiya Drishti that actually can contribute, and there is, this approach is multidisciplinary and holistic and is innovative. So this is essentially what NEP 2020 talks about. It talks about multi-linguistic, multidisciplinary approaches. And anyway, one more thing that unique about the Indian knowledge systems is Bharati Jnana Parampara Bharatiya Bhashaon mein hai. So this essentially was in all the Bharatiya Bhashas that you actually find. So there is important, it will connect to that multilinguistic learning that NEP 2020 also talks about. And one way, if we talk about this 25 years of Amritkal, which our Prime Minister talks about, one of the important things there that we need to realize is that we still have a lot of people who are young and who are poor. And if we want to basically elevate our country and become a more developed country in every sense and make sure that everybody has the needs, basic needs taken care of and all that, then it is important for us to be inclusive in our any development approaches. And how do you include? It is important that we emphasize on the multilinguistic teaching. And what is that we can do? As teachers, we can actually talk in as many languages as we can in our classes. And even 2011 census shows that 89% of Indians do not know English. And even that 11% have English, most of them have English as the second language or third language. So it's important for us to communicate in our भारतीय भाषा. भारतीय भाषाओं में जितना हम लोग बात कर सकते हैं कक्षाओं में वो उतना अच्छा रहेगा, और उसी में हम भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा के जो मूल्य हैं और उसके पद्धतियां हैं उसको अगर लेकर आ सकते हैं तो बहुत अच्छा रहेगा. And because of this, और unfortunately क्या हुआ था last 150-200 years में, there was a this innovative approaches, ये जो dynamic जो tradition था, परंपरा था, वो कहीं ना कहीं टूट गया है. तो अभी भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा का जो ज्ञान है और स्रोत है वो सब अभी लाइब्रेरीज में तक सीमित हो गए हैं. उसको हमें लैबोरेटरीज तक लाना है. तो अगर हम देखें तो सूत्रा जो टेक्स्ट बोलते हैं, जो एक्चुअल ओरिजिनल वर्क होते हैं, वो 200-250 साल पहले रुक गया. उसके बाद कोई किसी ने नए सूत्र नहीं लिखे. तो आज हमको ऐसे इसको रिजुवेनेट करना है, तो फिर से पुनरुत्थान इसका करना है जिस तरह से कि वो उसमें भी नए सूत्र बने. और नए सूत्र कैसे बनते हैं, वो सिर्फ भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा तक सीमित रह के नहीं बनेंगे. आजकल जो मॉडर्न जो मेथड्स हैं, साइंसेस हैं, उन सबको इंटीग्रेट करके इस तरह से बनाना है कि वो आज के प्रॉब्लम्स और कल के प्रॉब्लम्स को वो हल कर सके. तो वो इंक्लूसिवनेस की बहुत जरूरी है, और उसमें इंक्लूसिव एक्सेलेंस लाने की जरूरत है. ये अगर जब तक हम एक्सेलेंस को परस्यू नहीं करते हैं, वो जिज्ञासा को पूरा नहीं करते हैं, जो प्रश्न उठाना है तो एक बात है, लेकिन उसको हल निकालना भी हमारे ऊपर ही रहता है. तो एज टीचर्स हमको वो उसका आचरण करके दिखाना है कि हम we practice inclusiveness, we practice excellence. And unless we do that through the Indian knowledge systems, it is not going to work in the way that the NEP 2020 envisions. इसमें आप क्या कर सकते हैं एज टीचर्स, व्हाट आर द थिंग्स दैट द टीचर्स कैन डू. तो फ्यू थिंग्स एटलीस्ट में बहुत सारे हैं, लेकिन मैं 3 चीजें आपके मुख्य विषय आपके सामने रखना चाहता हूँ. पहला बात ये होता है कि हमको कोलैबोरेट करना है, क्योंकि आजकल ऐसा है हमारा कि बहुत सारे लोग हम जो टेक्निकल चीजों में या मॉडर्न एजुकेशन मेथड में जो गुजरे हैं, वी आर नॉट वेरी फेमिलियर विद द ट्रेडिशनल नॉलेज सिस्टम. सो इसीलिए जरूरी है कि वी कोलैबोरेट विद ट्रेडिशनल स्कॉलर्स एज मच एज पॉसिबल एंड देन bring that and understand the methods, or to improve and bring the Indian knowledge systems into the modern mainstream. So for that we need to collaborate. The second thing that we can do is we can actually do original research into this. So we need to think of new Aryabhattas who need to come out, and we need to think of new Bhaskaras who will come out, and Madhavas who will proclaim based on their experimental evidence that their model is the best. And that is the kind of thing that we need to do. For that, there is a requirement for deep scholarly research in this area. And it is the higher educational institutions, teachers from all the institutions who will actually be able, who should be taking the leadership of this, because we pursue jnana for the sake of, with a prayojana, that is again the Bharati Jnana Parampara thing. But we need to do that. When we do that, we essentially are doing it in the sense of finding for the welfare of all, essentially, that inclusive excellence thing. And for that, it is important that the teachers who are genuine scholars take the leadership positions and they actually speak out. And they do the research and bring out the things without glorifying the past unnecessarily. It's good to feel pride about what we have done, but that's not enough. It's as bad to dismiss what we have done as it is to say that we had everything in Vedas. Those two statements are something that cause a lot of anguish to us, especially at the IKS division, because we need to really think about things from a very grounded perspective, and that is what we need to really think about. So as teachers, one of the things that we need to really be doing is, unless to do research, original research in these areas, that will enable us to speak authoritatively with the adhikara that we will have to speak on any topic. And then third thing, it is not enough if we become scholars. It is important that we nurture younger scholars and create a new generation of scholars who are bigger than us, what we are doing today. They should be able to do something even better than what we do. And that is essentially the essence of a Guru Shishya Parampara. Therefore, we need to develop very authentic courses and teach them to as many students as possible, and then disseminate it and nurture our young scholars. These are the 3 action points that I would place before you. The first one is to collaborate with traditional scholars so that we are familiar with the Indian depth of the Indian knowledge systems. And then we do research, original research. Methods can be from anywhere, but keeping that 3 unique things about Indian knowledge systems in mind, which is the Bharatiya Drishti, multidisciplinary approaches, and then innovative approaches that we use. And then develop course. And then third thing is to develop courses for the nurturing the younger generation. How can we at the IKS division in the ministry can help you? many projects and schemes that we have. But a few things that I will mention to you. The first thing is, if you internship projects where you actually can nurture interns, train them under you on and have them work on some kind of a research project. The second thing that we have is we have funding for research projects, which are again deep scholarly primary research based research projects. And third, we have IKS centers, where if you have a group of faculty members who have been working in your institution for a few years, they can come together and form an IKS center of excellence center, so that this is the seed for the center of excellence that can come up in the future. We also do a lot of faculty development programs. So this is, again, if you are a teacher and you want to know how to get into this, for example, you can attend some of the faculty development programs. There have been two faculty development programs that we have partnered with in the past. And then there is another faculty development program with the Center of Excellence of IKS in IIT Kharagpur that is coming up in next 2 months. So please be on the lookout for those. That is an opportunity to those of you who are interested in the Indian knowledge systems, but then don't know where to start. That is a great place to start. This is an 18-day, very rigorous Indian knowledge systems faculty development program. And I think you may want to consider that as an approach. And then to ensure that we maintain that, refresh our knowledge, as Swami Vivekananda apparently once said, that if you don't revise your class notes for 2 years, you'll be outdated. And somebody in the audience remarked, sir, it is not 2 years, it's 1 year. Every year, things are changing at a rapid pace. So there is an important need for us to refresh our current knowledge. Therefore, it is important for you all to think about attending some of the faculty development programs. And then we are working with the UGC to incorporate Indian knowledge systems modules into the teacher training programs at the induction level, and also at the offer some courses at the refresher courses levels, so that you actually can update yourself into all of these knowledge systems. And so essentially those kind of many opportunities are there with the IKS division. You can please go to the IKS division, iksindia.org website. You'll find a lot of information there how you can participate. So in a sense, as you can see, without the teachers, nothing will happen really. We can keep talking about all the wonderful things that we are doing, but unless the teachers have a buy-in, they feel that the Indian knowledge systems is something that they will actually, they need to teach to the students. This bringing Indian knowledge systems into the mainstream is not going to happen. So we have been trying our best to interact with many of you. And if you have any questions at any time, please do contact us. And it is your role as teachers that is essentially a very important important part for the success of the whole thing. And as I was just mentioning earlier, there is an FDP coming out in IIT Kharagpur, Center of Excellence, Indian Knowledge Systems there. And please do participate. It is essentially about science and technology. And you'll be surprised at the amount of depth of science and technology that is there in the Indian knowledge systems. And it is, again, to reiterate, Indian knowledge systems is important not just for thinking about the past, but it's actually important for solving some of the current and existential problems that are coming, we are going to face. We are facing now and we are going to face in the next 15, 20 years. So, so in that, your role as teachers is the most critical one. Without you, nothing will happen. So with folded hands, we request you all to please explore this. And once you explore this, you will find that you'll find something that you will be able to relate to in the Indian knowledge system, because it's so vast that you'll find everybody will find something that will be of interest to you, and you'll be passionate about it, and you'll get involved. So my request is to explore a little bit and into the Indian knowledge systems, and then as you go forward, please take this forward and integrate this into your every class, every subject that you teach, and then please nurture the younger scholars. With those few words, I would like to take stop here, and namaste everyone. Thank you. We'll have question and answers a little later. And now I think now Professor Michel Danino-ji has joined us. And as I was saying earlier, for a teacher, nothing is greater than a class. And that is what he was attending, and he just finished his class. That is why he is a little delayed, as I was saying earlier. And I'm grateful that he's here. And Professor Michel Danino does not need any introduction. He is one of the key people who have dedicated their lives to bring out the scientific and all the knowledge aspects of Indian knowledge systems in various, many dimensions, especially with a focus on the archaeology and Saraswati. And he has written a wonderful book on Saraswati and its relationship to the Indian civilization and all, and has done excellent work on the different architectural engineering aspects and architecture of Bharata. And he's been organizing 5 years. I think this is the fifth year now of semester-long courses at IIT Gandhinagar, which are all available on the web. You can actually go and watch those lectures, and they're wonderfully done by biggest experts that you can find in those areas. Each year has a theme, and he has done immense amount of work on tapasya in this area. So it is my real pleasure and honor to welcome Professor Michel Danino to speak on the role of teachers in the Indian knowledge systems. Namaste, sir, please.
Namaste. I hope I'm audible to all. And thank you so much for this invitation and for the very kind words, Professor Murthy. We are indeed, now we will be, this academic year, we will be having the 7th edition of the Indian Knowledge Systems course at IIT Gandhinagar. And when I started in 2015, or let us say January 2016, I, gave a small introduction to explain, first of all, why do we call it Indian knowledge systems? The term has become now very, very much fashionable and widely used, and it deserves to be. My first thought was, of course, I borrowed the term from another very great towering scholar, Professor Kapil Kapoor, who had been using it at JNU during his time. And I wanted to use that particular term because it was about systems of thought. It was not about, let us say, scattered empirical knowledge, which is also very important. But I was using the term systems as a Shastra. So just have, we have Ganita Shastra, we have Vastu Shastra, we have Artha Shastra, we have Krishi Shastra, and so on. Jyotisha Shastra. So all these are basically systems. There is a theory and there is a practice. This is what, to me, constitutes a system where we can legitimately use this term. I notice that people sometimes use with a very, very wide range, and everything becomes an Indian knowledge system. Well, I was using this term in a very specialized sense of a system of thought that creates a theory that can then be applied. For example, Ayurveda has a theory. It's not just a set of recipes, collected. It also includes recipes, but it's not about, grandmother recipes, however valuable they may be. So Indian knowledge did organize itself in systems which do not exactly match our current disciplines, and that is one difficulty that we are going to find in integrating IKS, whether at school or university level, is that we have to kind of fall into the straitjacket of the modern disciplines, and they don't always correspond very well. I'll be coming to that in a minute. So therefore, I thought I would go by the ancient categories mostly. And yes, we did different years, 6 of them now passed, on specific themes from ancient society, from technologies, literature, the arts, and so on. And the next year from January onward will be on the living traditions of Sanskrit. And we will be actually challenging and revisiting the concept that Sanskrit is a dead language or an elitist language and of no particular consequence or use in India today. And we will show how actually Sanskrit is still very present in many ways, through many disciplines, through many activities in India. So this is my own brief introduction. And we hope to publish, with the help of the ministry cell, to publish now all these sets of lectures by wonderful scholars in source books, volumes that can be used by anyone going into those fields. Now, what I would like, since we are talking about the role of teachers today, and I apologize in advance if I'll be repeating slightly differently some of the things that Professor Murthy has explained so clearly and enthusiastically. I would like to first of all say that the big challenge is going to be, first of all, for the teachers. And here I'm not talking just at higher education level. There's not much difference at school level. Of course, there are problems of integration which are a little different at school level. But the challenge will be that whenever we are going to train teachers, first of all, we have to readily admit that we have several generations of teachers who are totally disconnected from these fields, totally. And most of them are very ignorant or have very, very crude notions about those fields of knowledge, of ancient, classical, medieval India, and even colonial sometimes. So therefore, the challenge is that now we have to make up for lost time. We have to fill this gap. And one of the methods, apart from telling the teachers how all this is to be integrated in the new education, and new education policy is going to do that at the level of school education, while I think UGC now is trying hard to, bring out a policy for higher education. So this integration is something that the policymakers are going to work out with educationists, with the for school education, the National Steering Committee under Dr. Kasturi Rangan, which is formulating a national curriculum framework where IKS, knowledge of India, as we call it at the school level, is going to be fairly central. But once all these policies are fixed, the question is now, what do we expect from the teachers? And the first thing we expect from the teachers is that, of course, they have to make an extra effort to acquire the basic training that will allow them to teach those disciplines. Whether sometimes they will be taught as separate disciplines and separate specific courses, which may well happen in higher education in particular, or whether these will be integrated in the existing disciplines, like you add a chapter on history of mathematics to a regular standard course on mathematics. I think both schemes are going to happen for some time. So that's not what I'm going to be concerned with at the moment. But in whatever framework the teacher is going to intervene now and fulfill this totally neglected role of imparting to Indian students knowledge of ancient classical systems of thought and knowledge, which should have been done the day after independence, almost, if I may say so. It should have been a concern immediately as independence was reached. For whatever reasons, it didn't happen. And in fact, Anglicized education continued to become, in a way, more and more Anglicized, even more than in England, if I may say so. So the point here is, how do the teachers operate? What do we expect from them? So we expect them, of course, to allow themselves to be trained. But training is going to be only, to me, a small part of the picture. I don't see how possibly any organization, any scheme could impart all the knowledge necessary. It can impart some of it, and in fact, we had a committee in UGC to design a policy under Professor Murthy, in fact, of teacher training. But at the end of the day, the teachers have to collaborate. They have to understand the importance of this mission. They have to understand that if we want strong, self-confident, self-reliant, intellectually self-reliant young Indians who at the same time can, interact with the rest of the world on an equal footing, then we really need to communicate this knowledge in effective ways. So to me, the first thing is not only training, but self-training. We have to put so much material at the disposal of the teachers that they will continue to go through it to train themselves, of course, attending once in a while training programs, orientation programs, lectures. There will be resources of online videos and so on and so forth. There will be books. There are already a few. There will be more and more, hopefully, as time passes. So unless there is a willing participation and effort from the teacher, something that they are not used to in the present culture of teacher training, I think that it will take decades instead of years for this presence of Indian knowledge in education as we wish. There are two big challenges, or maybe three, in front of them. One is to understand the nature of the Indian knowledge system. So this is actually quite a difficulty, because you see, you may read Aryabhatta, and you may say, oh, he solves this equation in this particular way. Nice. Or he extracts this square root in that particular algorithm. Very good. And I've understood everything. Well, no, that's not the point. Technical knowledge, fine. That can be acquired. But the whole spirit and nature of Indian knowledge systems, first of all, needs to be well understood. And I would put 5 features in front of all the teachers, 5 characteristics that need to be well understood in depth and communicated to the students. The first is that Indian knowledge traditions have been, and here I will again borrow 2 terms from Professor Kapil Kapoor, they have been continuous and cumulative. Continuous because there are long traditions. Once in a while there is some brief interruption. It seems to go underground and then it reappears. But by and large, the continuity can be traced in all these disciplines. And therefore, we have some people exaggerate and say 5,000 years. No, we cannot often go beyond 2,500 years. That's more than enough. We're not concerned with the antiquity here. But we do have these very, very long traditions to which hundreds of scholars, most of them unknown by now, have contributed, and numerous texts, many of which are still not mined, exploited, read sometimes, even less published. But hopefully some of the very important texts are. And therefore, this nature of cumulative that every scholar adds, you see very often in European intellectual traditions, it has become fairly fashionable in the last 300-400 years that one, let us say, literary movement, let's say realism, throws out romanticism in European literature. So you keep throwing out what was there before. Actually, you don't really, because you still are building upon what was there, but you reject what came before. This does not happen in Indian intellectual tradition. There is no need to reject. There is only need to add. So you add new findings, or if you cannot give new findings, you can add a commentary, a bhashya. So typically, very often, you have the basic Shastra, sometimes in sutra form, very, very brief. It depends, of course, on the discipline. And then you will have the bhashya, the elaborations, which will help communicate the initial knowledge. And very often, these bhashyas will also add to it. And then you will have another siddhanta or treatise coming up later, and then more bhashyas and so on. So it is a continuous and cumulative intellectual tradition, intellectual or artistic or scientific or technological or whatever it may be. So this is important because therefore we have in front of one of the oldest intellectual traditions of the world, which very often extend, sometimes extends all the way to today. If you see, for example, Ayurveda, or if you see, Shilpa Shastra or Vastu Shastra, for example, for temple construction. I'm not referring, of course, to the modern variety of Vastu experts. They are not really in the old tradition, but if you apart from these few examples, some have kind of stopped. For example, the mathematical ancient tradition of India extends all the way to the 19th century, but kind of stops with the irruption of modern mathematics. So all these have to be very well understood, and nevertheless, it's a very, you know, respectable, venerable, imposing tradition, and its contributions to many other traditions in the world have to also to be understood. That has to be part of the training of the teachers, where the way these knowledge traditions have given to the world, sometimes also received, but mostly given. And this is documented by a huge number of scholarly works. So this is also something to be understood. It's part of the nature of the IKS that they, you know, they are not secretive, except maybe in a few very specialized disciplines like Rasa Shastra, for example, alchemy, or let us say ancient chemistry. Yes, there was, as part of the initiation, the students, disciples were sworn to secrecy. There were certain secret procedures. But this is a special case. Most of the time, it is rather the opposite. And those knowledge traditions are available far and wide and will travel far and wide, which is why you find traces of Ayurveda from Greece all the way to Japan. You find, you know, medicinal herbs in the Roman Empire and so on. So this is number one. Two, interdisciplinarity, I will not re-emphasize because Professor Murthy has said it sufficiently, but you cannot map one-to-one those systems with our current disciplines. In mathematics, you have Bhaskaracharya using high poetry. You have for example, in astronomy, you have the eruption of logic, nyaya, sometimes Vaisheshika, sometimes Sankhya, and so on. So all these, you know, fields keep crossing each other and contributing to each other, and this interdisciplinarity will have to be respected. You cannot teach mathematics in isolation. You cannot teach medicine without a little bit of chemistry, a little bit of metallurgy, and quite a good deal of yoga. You see, it branches out into all these fields. So this is also a very important characteristic of IKS. Thirdly, the fact that these Indian knowledge systems have not been excessively theoretical. They have been adaptable, they have been realistic, they have been pragmatic. The objective of Indian mathematics, for example, was to give pragmatic methods of calculation, not theoretical models like Euclid, for example, constructed. If you see Chanakya, for example, you see they will give a theoretical model of Ayurveda, but they will give primacy to experience. At the end of the day, they will say, well, this is the theory, now you practice and you go by your experience. Experience has primacy over the theory. The theory should never be regarded as dogmatic once and for all. So this is also very important. And realistic, because you see again, Chanakya, if I may take that example, will tell us that if you want to understand, you know, the properties of a particular medicinal plant, go to the hunter and go to the tribal, the mountain dweller or the forest dweller. So therefore, there is you know, a constant interplay also between what is sometimes called the Marga tradition, the greater tradition, and the Deshi tradition, the local traditions, okay, more popular traditions. And this interplay also has to be very well understood. Number five, this pragmatism is ultimately in order to be of service to the society. The mathematics, the astronomy, I think Professor Murthy mentioned the Panchangas, for example. It is very visible in agriculture, it's very visible in medicine, very visible even in architecture. All these disciplines ultimately have to benefit, and the technologies, of course, metallurgy, water management, and so on, have to benefit the society. So it is not an elitist knowledge, and this is one colonial prejudice which we still find repeated in today's India and even in some textbooks. Indian knowledge was not elitist. It was meant to spread. Of course, certain classes and sometimes certain castes, if you like, were more specialized, and this was more their function. And generally, they tended to follow it, not always. And it's not as if the other castes were excluded. So, on the contrary, we see how this knowledge permeates to all the classes, and sometimes is owned by, for example, the Vishwakarmas, who are technically Shudras, are the ones who will own the Vastu Shastra much more than, let us say, Brahmins. So this has to be well understood, this pragmatism, this society-oriented, ultimately, usage of the knowledge. And finally, the relevance. So this relevance is something that the teacher will have to keep thinking about. How do we convince the student that this ancient knowledge is not just for, for the scholars, it's not just bookish, it's not just something disconnected from our world today. And the answer is that it's very, very easy to establish the relevance in some fields. Once again, medicine, agriculture, water management, architecture, and several more. In other fields, it may not be so obvious. For example, whether ancient Indian chemistry still holds certain procedures that could be of use in modern chemistry. Well, it was the case with metallurgy. In the 19th century, for example, the study of woods, steel, and the rustless iron pillar did act as a stimulus to the development of European metallurgy. But whether today you can go to the text of Rasa Shastra and use them in modern chemistry, well, unless we first of all research these texts, we cannot really answer this question. Whether mathematics can still produce some interesting results for mathematics, a few years ago I would have answered no, but today actually I've changed my mind, because I see several people. We have a young scholar who's been working with us at IIT Gandhinagar. His name is Dr. Raghava Simhan Tirunarayanan, and he's just now studying how a particular form of equation solving is actually better than in ancient Indian mathematics, is actually more efficient, better than the current method which is used today. So there are possibilities which will be more or less obvious according to the respective disciplines, and that itself is a huge field of study which the teachers have to go into, of course, constantly guided by scholars, but therefore all this is part of the training and the self-training. I don't see, without a proper understanding of all these characteristics and functions of Indian knowledge systems, how we will succeed in our mission. The last 2 points very quickly, that the challenges that face the teachers. So one was mentioned by Professor Murthy, the complete absence of hollow glorification. The whole purpose is not to claim that Indian civilization was the greatest or the most ancient. We don't care about this, because all ancient civilizations were great, and it's a very, very interesting and colossal field of study in itself. But we're not trying to compare. We just want every Indian student to have at least some understanding more than memorizing a collection of facts. The facts will come along, but the understanding of this nature of Indian knowledge and what it achieved, and why you find the growth of European mathematics, for example, definitely made possible through certain ingredients that traveled from India through the Arabs and so on. That story is very well known. So this will automatically generate a certain amount of pride and self-confidence in the student, but without the teacher even trying to impart any pride. There's no need. It comes automatically, and it comes in the right way, because this is pride founded on knowledge. There is nothing more dangerous than pride founded on ignorance. And this is what we find in many YouTube videos, in many number of claims that, You know all of these, that we had interplanetary travel, we had flying machines, we already knew relativity, quantum physics, and whatnot. So all these claims are absurd. Some of them are a little bit less absurd than that, and there are also gray areas where we can make a claim we don't know. For example, did ancient India figure out that there are microorganisms invisible to the eye? Well, there is some fairly good evidence of it in some Ayurveda texts. But still, we have to be very cautious, because how did they figure it out when they had no microscopes? So this should actually involve us into some research, some reflection, and not just the hollow claim again to prove that we were the greatest and so on. So this is extremely important, and therefore remaining very down to earth, almost conservative sometimes, I would say, and cautious and without taking any shortcuts. This is a very important challenge in front of the teachers. And the third and last, and I will end with this, is that this whole field, actually now it is part of the whole new pedagogy of the new education policy, the National Education Policy, NEP. It's the same with all fields, but even more so with this field of Indian knowledge systems. It should absolutely not be taught the way things were taught up to now, which is, asking simply the student to be a passive sponge, a recipient, absorbing a number of facts and dates and names of figures and text, names of text, and so on. This will be counterproductive, because we have to make space for these new disciplines to come in, and we want to reduce the overall curriculum. Everybody agrees that the overall curriculum is overburdened at school and often in higher education. So we have to reduce it, and yet we'll be adding to it now. We cannot add to it in a way that is going to overburden the student. The facts, the main dates, the main figures, all this should come as a consequence. It should, but the engine driving the train should not be this. The engine driving the train should be triggering curiosity in the student and making the student, leading the student to reflect upon all this. By asking all the big questions, what purpose did they serve? Were they elitist or not? If a text of Ayurveda describes a particular sophisticated operation procedure, what are we to conclude? Is it of still possible use today? Did the Greeks absorb some of Indian medicine? Yes or no? Why do we find similar outlays of temples in the Roman Empire and in India? So there are so many questions which don't have to be answered with any finality, by the way. It's not about finding total perfect answers. Once in a blue moon, we may be able to. But the purpose is to trigger the thinking processes of the student, where all these natural questions will come, and therefore the pedagogy has to be very carefully thought out. It has to be engaging. It has to use good, authentic audiovisual material, possibly some outdoors activities or some indoors project whenever possible. It may not always be possible, where there can be some hands-on, like the way, for example, ICAR some 20, 30 years ago tested ancient agricultural practices listed in texts of Vriksha Ayurveda and found that 80% of these procedures were valid. Well, nothing prevents a school from, buying some panchakavya and testing it on two kinds of plants in the garden of the school, one with and the other without, and seeing, you can design sometimes certain simple experiments, exercises, activities, which we try to do to some little extent in our textbooks, which was written some years ago for the CBSE. This is the Knowledge, Traditions and Practices of India. This was piloted by Professor Kapil Kapoor, and he and I edited those 2 volumes, and we try to think of a number of activities for every possible disciplines. There are about 20 different disciplines in those two volumes. So, so these are basically the challenges. They are very considerable. We have now to start creating a new generation of teachers altogether. It's not going to happen overnight. It will take years for all this to settle down. And there will be some mistakes here and there, which is fine. It's part of the process. It cannot be helped. There will be some misunderstandings, but we will have to keep, you know, our vision and direction very clear in front of us and generate as much good material as possible. There is already some. There's plenty of excellent scholarly material, but that is, well, usually not going to be very, very accessible to the teachers. So we have to now create more popularizing material for both the teachers and the student, and that's going to take some time. So this very briefly is just my quick thoughts on this whole issue and on, you know, how do we help design a proper roadmap that will fulfill this whole vision. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Dhanwati. That was really great. Thank you so much for and then when you speak, the depth of that knowledge shines through. I mean, it just comes up. So many things that you were talking about, and I think what you mentioned, one of the things you mentioned that there are about the claims and all those things. You know, we often, even for the claims that are realistic and we see things, we see the results, but the evidence for that, the valuation of that, it's still missing. Many a times we know, for example, an alloy was made, but then we don't know. I mean, even the Delhi iron pillar, for example, we know the composition, but we don't know how it was made. And there is a need for people to really look for that, as our honorable Prime Minister said, परिणाम मिलते हैं लेकिन प्रमाण नहीं मिलते. So he was saying that we get the results but not the evidence, and I think that is where we need to really think about that thing. Bring it up. And I would like to open it up for any questions that anybody has. I know that we are only seeing only 5 people here, but I know that there is an online chat going on, online live session. So can I request somebody from the Atal Academy to see if there are any questions, please? And let me try to find that. I think this, I mean, I'm watching the YouTube live chat. If there are any questions from the audience, you can ask them there, and I will be asking them, asking Professor then, you know. So. All I see is a comment by Mohan Pillaiji talking about conversion of IKS into digital format is most essential. Right? There is a lot of material already available online and even otherwise. And even at IKS division, we are digitizing about 1.4 lakh books to putting that digital format, searchable format. Also, the archive.org has many collections. And I mean, there is a lot of material, especially the secondary research type material already available. Something again, it's a work of continuous progress. I don't see there are any too many questions. There are just more of comments. So I think thank you so much, Professor Devanerji, for coming, and thank you so much. We'll be in touch.
Thanks again. I will leave the meeting now. Thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much. Namaste. And thank you all for attending this session on role of teachers in promoting the Indian knowledge systems. And if you have any questions, please do feel free to reach out to the IKS division. And again, I would like to thank Mamta ji for giving us this opportunity to talk about this very important topic. And then to the Atal Cell for organizing this Shiksha Parv from 5th of September to 9th of September. So with those things, we'll take leave until we meet with you all tomorrow. Namaste. Namaste.